So I, 28F, have been married to my husband, 30M, for 4 years. We got married after 3 years of dating. He and I have had a normal relationship apart from this one factor, his relationship with his best friend. His best friend, as he calls her, was his neighbor growing up and they did everything together. I'll refer to her as Fiona. Fiona and my husband went to the same daycare, kindergarten, middle school, and high school too. They also went to the same college but were in different departments. They have been inseparable since they were kids, something I cannot forget because they keep bringing it up every chance they get. They only went their separate ways once they got jobs, thankfully. That's how I met my husband, and Fiona tells me that I'm the third woman in my husband's life. The first being his mother, the second being she, and then, me. She says it like it's a joke, but I'm not sure if she doesn't actually mean it. Full disclosure, I've always thought that she didn't like me and saw me as competition. When my husband and I first started dating, he had introduced her to me as his oldest friend and I had tried to be nice to her, but she instantly started making fun of how much makeup I'd been wearing that day and told me that I didn't need to impress her. This continued and she would often take potshots at me about my makeup, my clothes, and stuff. If not that, then there were always backhanded compliments to make me feel insecure. She once told me to my face that my husband's type was dumb blondes. I am blonde. I guess by now, you guys have an idea of the kind of woman I'm talking about. I tried to talk to my husband several times while we were dating to tell him that I didn't have a good feeling about Fiona, but he brushed it off and always told me that I would warm up to her eventually. And that she was an acquired taste because she never minced her words and was a little too blunt for other women to handle. I guess the fact that my husband kept putting down everyone else to make her seem like a good person should have been enough of a warning for me, but honestly, at the time, it seemed like a small price to pay to be with him. Because he was a perfect guy otherwise. He was everything I ever wanted, smart, funny, charming, and I was ready to tolerate Fiona because I really wanted to be with him. And he always made sure that I knew he loved me, so everything was good. I started ignoring Fiona after some time and didn't let her get under my skin. And once she found a guy for herself, it got even better because she stopped picking on me for no reason. 4 years ago, Fiona met Eddie on a dating app, and within a year, they were engaged. To say that she was smitten with him would be an understatement, and he seemed pretty in love with her as well. In spite of their obvious affection for one another, I still believe that a year was not enough to really get to know someone, and they hadn't even been living together for long enough to entertain the idea of marriage. But Fiona and I are not friends, and I knew that if I tried to say something to her, she would make a fuss out of it, so I kept my mouth shut. I did tell my husband about it, hoping that he would nudge her in the right direction, but he only kept talking about how great it was that both he and Fiona were engaged at the same time and would probably end up getting married around the same time as well. They had been talking about a joint wedding, but I shot that idea down before it got out of control by saying that Fiona and her ideas were very different from what I wanted, and thankfully, she didn't insist on it. She got married to Eddie around a month after us and everything was beautiful until very recently. 5 months ago, Fiona confided in my husband and told him that she had been struggling to get pregnant and she and Eddie were about to get tested since they'd been trying for almost 6 months with no results. And unfortunately, Fiona turned out to be infertile. Things started going sour in her marriage after that revelation, and even though they tried marriage counseling, it didn't work for her because Eddie decided to file for divorce anyway. Because he couldn't be with a woman who he couldn't have his own kids and family with, and he didn't want to waste any more of his life. It was really low and disgusting of him, and I actually felt pretty bad for Fiona. She started visiting us way more often than she used to, and I put up with it because I knew that she was going through a really difficult time, and my husband was obviously the only friend that she could count on. I honestly didn't even have the heart to feel annoyed by her frequent visits because every time she would come over, she would just be crying and my husband would try to console her. It was quite impossible to feel annoyed by someone who was already suffering so much because I knew that she really loved Eddie. Then the process of coming to a settlement started, and she had to see him when they met for their sessions, which proved to be even more difficult for her, and she started spiraling even deeper. So my husband asked me if she could live with us for a while until she started feeling better, because she claimed that apparently being around us made her feel sane again. That was almost 2 weeks ago, and as soon as I let her into my house, I started to regret it. Not only was she critical of every single thing that I did, but she got away with it as well because of how depressed she was. She didn't like the cooking, she didn't like the way our house had been decorated, and she didn't like the shows that I watched, so we had to do everything her way because my husband believed that she needed it right now. I told him several times that I wanted her out and that she could move back in with her parents if she was going to be ungrateful, but he begged me to let her stay because he was afraid that she might end up doing something stupid to herself if we kicked her out at such a delicate stage. So I didn't say anything to her because I wouldn't want something like that on my conscience. However, I had to kick both of them out of my house the day before yesterday because they took things way too far. When I came back home from work, I realized that my husband had moved a lot of his stuff from our bedroom to the guest bedroom, where Fiona had been living. He had actually come back home early to do all that, and when I returned, he and Fiona were still moving his things to the guest bedroom. I was really confused and I asked to speak with him privately, but he told me that I could speak with him freely in front of her because she wouldn't mind. Truth be told, for the first time in several weeks, Fiona actually looked like she was happy. So I asked him why he was moving his things into the guest bedroom, and he told me, quite casually, that he was going to be living with Fiona in the same room now. I was stunned for a few seconds, and when I asked him why that was, he told me that Fiona had been having panic attacks for several days in a row and she needed someone to be there to comfort her when she woke up in the middle of the night and was losing her mind over her divorce. I instantly told him that he couldn't do that, and it was crazy that he even expected me to be okay with it, but he used the same excuse that he had been using for years when it came to Fiona and said that she was like a sister to him and I had nothing to worry about. Both of them were smiling at me, as if smiling about this was going to make this better and make it seem like a normal thing to want to do. I was so angry and frustrated that I wanted to smack them both, but instead, my anger reached such a crazy level that I chose to deal with it a different way. I smiled right back at them and told them that I understood where they were coming from and it was all completely fine with me. My husband even had the audacity to say that he knew I would be okay with it, and they went back to setting up the room. In the meantime, I went back to our bedroom and brought out the deed to our house. This house had been a gift to me by my father from when I got my first job, so it only had my name on it, and legally, the house belongs to me. When I found that document, I went back into the guest room and asked them really sweetly if they were done unpacking. When they said that they were, I told them that they could start packing again. Because they were about to end up on the streets, where they could play happy family all they wanted to. My husband looked really confused for a while until I brought out the deed and told him that this house was mine and I was no longer going to tolerate either of them living under my roof and disrespecting me. He tried to laugh it off because he thought that I was joking, but when I didn't laugh along, he told me that I was being ridiculous and that I couldn't just kick them out. So I told him that I could, and I was actively in the process of kicking them out, so he couldn't argue with me. I told him that I was sick of him, and I was even more sick of having Fiona around because she was nothing but a blubbering mess right now, and a really annoying one at that. She started crying yet again when I said that, and my husband started to defend her and accused me of always being jealous of her because I was insecure. I didn't even bother to deny it because it was true, I was insecure. But that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with their weird relationship. I told them if they really couldn't live without each other, then they should probably only stick to each other instead of getting with other people and ruining their lives, like mine. It turned into a really nasty fight after that, but eventually, they did go away because my husband said that he felt insulted since he had been nothing but loyal to me, but even that wasn't good enough for me. Fiona didn't stop crying until she was out of the house and accused me of being evil and jealous, even as she was leaving. I didn't respond to her because I just didn't have the energy to argue with them anymore. I just wanted them to go away. I had believed that my troubles would come to an end once they were gone, but apparently not. Because as soon as I kicked them out, our common friends who had never felt the need to talk about our relationship started texting me to tell me that I was making a big deal out of nothing. They believed that my husband was just trying to be a good friend to Fiona because panic attacks are no joking matter, and instead of taking it seriously, I was making it all about myself and my own insecurities. I could tell that he had put them up to this because the content of all the messages was pretty much the same, more or less. So I tried to ignore it, but then he got all his family and relatives to talk to me as well, and they were all telling me that I was being horrible to both of them by kicking them out when Fiona was going through such a difficult phase of her life. They told me that I was heartless and that I didn't deserve a husband like him in the first place because they had always known that I was never going to be good enough for him. And deep down, even I knew that, which is why I was so insecure and felt threatened by Fiona. I didn't think that it was worth it to try and argue with them, so I just blocked everybody for my own peace of mind, since nobody was going to understand what I was going through. Because they didn't even care, they only cared about my husband and Fiona and what they felt. I thought that blocking them was the solution and was going to file for divorce, but then my husband reached out to me through a different number and told me that he was still willing to come back to me, as long as I apologized. In that message, he told me yet again that he had always considered Fiona as the sister that he never had and had never had any romantic feelings for her. So I was really misinterpreting the whole situation. He told me that he cared for her deeply and even loved her, but it was more of a platonic sisterly love and not the romantic kind that I believed he had for her. Since that was just reserved for me, he told me that the thought of going through life without me was devastating for him. He said that he had made a mistake by leaving that day, but he also believed that I had reacted really harshly and misjudged the situation. He wanted me to think about things with a cooler head and consider the consequences of whatever I was planning to do calmly, since he didn't want me to make a mistake and then regret it for the rest of my life. He is ready to come back to me and mend our relationship as long as we can both apologize to each other for the misunderstandings. I really don't know how to react to that because as far as I'm concerned, I don't think I was harsh. But I don't know if it's the right call for me anymore to get divorced from him, since he insists that Fiona is like a sister to him. In all honesty, that message really threw me off, and now I'm wondering if I should even go through with any of this. Ida for kicking my husband out when he said that he wanted to share a room with his female best friend to comfort her during her panic attacks. Update 1. Hey, so. I guess I was really incredibly blind. The kind of criticism that I received in the comments of my original post was actually eye-opening because it made me realize that I had fallen asleep at the wheel and now my marriage was over. I should have nipped his friendship with Fiona in the bud, and that might have ended with us breaking up, but it would have been totally worth it because then at least I wouldn't have to get divorced now because of Fiona. I really don't understand how I allowed my husband to get away with so much. I guess I just really loved him and maybe still do. And that's why I was considering forgiving him and getting back together. In my defense, he is a smooth talker and had always tried to gaslight me into thinking that his friendship with Fiona was completely normal and my being insecure about it was just not acceptable. It had taken a lot of manipulation over the years to convince me of it. But he eventually managed to really push me to the limit when he tried to stay the night with her. That was just the final nail in the coffin. My parents are sympathetic and think I'm doing the right thing by going ahead with the divorce, since there really isn't any way that my husband and I can bounce back from something like this. He can't take back the things that he said, and I don't think he is going to break his friendship with Fiona just to be with me. It has been a couple of days and I still haven't texted him back. I don't even know where the two of them are right now, and I feel like I don't want to find out because I won't like the answer. Either way, this is happening. Because I need to move on from him and live my best life. I deserve somebody who always puts me first, and clearly, that was never going to be him. I was a complete fool for holding on to the hope that he might someday put me above Fiona, but now I know that's not going to happen, and it's best for me to just leave while I can. I have filed for divorce and he is going to be served in a couple of days, hopefully. Once again, thank you so much for commenting and making me realize how stupid I was being. I really needed to hear it. Update 2. My husband was served a week back and he has decided not to contest the divorce. One would think that if he's not contesting the divorce, then he wouldn't want to talk to me either. But he paid me a visit last evening to tell me that he was disappointed that I was giving up on our marriage over something so petty. I wasn't expecting him to show up at our house, especially after I had humiliated him and kicked them out, but he also had to collect a few things, so I had to let him in. After he was done packing, he sat down opposite me on the couch and told me that he wanted to speak to me. I didn't say anything throughout because I wanted to know what he had to say for himself. So he told me that he wasn't going to contest the divorce if that's what I wanted, but he wanted me to know that he believed that I was making a mistake. He said that he had always only ever loved me and found it insulting that I could even think that he would ever cheat on me. And with Fiona, of all people. He went on to say that they had been living with his parents and everyone was quite upset about my choice to leave over something like this after he was served. His mother actually wanted to speak to me in person apparently, but he had stopped her because he respected my choice and didn't want to back me into a corner by getting people to bother me. I thought that this was a bit rich coming from a guy who had told all his friends and family to text me and tell me to take him back. And that I was a horrible human being, a heartless person, and whatnot after I had first kicked him out. So I brought that up because I couldn't resist the need to remind him of what he had done, and he started looking really uncomfortable. He tried to deny the fact that he was behind it and told me that everyone who had texted me had done so because they wanted to and he had nothing to do with it. But I wasn't an idiot, and so I brought out the texts that our common friends had sent to me, and all of them were along the same lines. So I knew that someone had been feeding them what to say and they had just been regurgitating that while sending me those texts. The only person who stood to benefit from this was my husband, so denying it wasn't going to make it any less true. The fact of the matter was that he had tried to back me into a corner already and it hadn't worked, which is why he was not doing it again. It wasn't out of the kindness of his heart as he was claiming it to be. So then he tried to steer the conversation away from that and started talking to me about how difficult the past couple of days had been for him, knowing that our marriage was coming to an end. He started crying on the couch and said that life was just not going to be the same without me, and he constantly found himself wishing that there was something he could do to make things right with me. It was already pretentious enough that he was even trying to talk to me about these things, knowing fully well that nothing was going to change, but the crying was just a little too much. I didn't have any sympathy for him, and so I said the only thing that came into my head when he mentioned that he wished there was something he could do to fix this situation. So I told him that I might reconsider the divorce if he could promise me that he would never see Fiona again, and that really caught him by surprise. He stopped crying almost immediately and both of us waited silently for the other to say something. Just to be clear, I didn't have any intention of staying with him regardless of what his answer to that question was. Even if he had told me that he'd stop being friends with Fiona, I still wouldn't have stayed with him. But of course, he didn't say that and started arguing with me, saying that I was being unfair. He started bringing up everything that I had already heard before in every argument that we have had with regard to Fiona and his friendship, that she was his oldest friend in the world and that she was like a sister to him. He couldn't just abandon her for my sake, and she was already going through so much. It would be cruel of him to leave her side at this time. But I guess it was just fine for him to leave my side, even though I was literally his wife and he had made a commitment to me. I got bored of him listing reasons as to why he should still be friends with Fiona and stopped him before he could list more. I told him that this was exactly the reason why I was leaving, because even when he was given a chance to choose between staying married to me or being friends with Fiona, he chose his friendship over his marriage. So now he couldn't even complain that I hadn't given him a chance or that I was overreacting. I had been right about everything and my husband didn't have an answer to that. So he left quietly, and now we just have to wait for the legal proceedings to begin. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since the last update, and today we met in court for the first time. We have to wait for at least 6 months before we can finalize the divorce because that's the waiting period in our state, and afterward, My husband came up to me to tell me that he would wait out these 6 months if that's what was necessary to make me come back. I couldn't believe that he was still trying to win me over because it had been weeks since I last saw or even spoke to him. I didn't think that we had anything left to talk about now that the divorce was happening, but he still did speak to me and try to get back on good terms with me, I suppose. I just asked him if he was still living with Fiona and he didn't have an answer to that, so we just stood there quietly. I rolled my eyes at him and was about to get into the car when he told me that Fiona couldn't go back to living with her parents because her mother was insufferable and blamed Fiona for the divorce because she was the infertile one. That is why she had chosen to live with us and then, with his parents. I know that I was supposed to feel sorry for her, but it was really hard to feel bad for somebody who had always made me feel bad about myself and was the reason behind my divorce. I told my husband from inside the car that she had a lot of other friends too, unmarried ones, who would have gladly taken her in. It was just that my husband was unwilling to admit that there was something strange about their friendship. It had cost him our marriage, but he was still not ready to accept the truth and admit that it wasn't really necessary for him to move Fiona in with us. We had an argument about it right before I came back home, and it just made me realize, once again, how stupid I had been all along. I can't believe that I had even been reconsidering the divorce in the first place. My relationship with him has cost me a lot, our friends, my sanity, and a ton of money as well because Fiona had been living here for free and now I'm also going to have to pay for the lawyer. It's just crazy to me that I had been willing to look past so much just because I loved my husband. But he didn't love me enough, not even to admit that moving Fiona in with us was a bad move. It's ridiculous how stubborn he is when it comes to her, and I think it's a good thing that we are getting divorced because now he can finally be with the woman he actually loves and stop wasting my time. I just wish that he realizes it soon and stops chasing after me. Update 4. So something crazy just happened and I can't believe that my husband would ever say such horrible things about Fiona. We had met each other just a few days ago and I hadn't been expecting to hear from him so soon, but he came by yesterday to finally admit that he was wrong and that I had been right about every single thing. He had finally apologized to me and was owning up to his mistakes, which I never thought would happen. It was a huge shock for me, and part of me still can't believe that he finally realized how wrong he was and that Fiona had always had it in for me. I had been minding my own business when I came back home from work, and that's when he showed up and started ringing the doorbell frantically. When I opened the door, he just stormed in without even waiting for me to say anything, and I could tell that he was riled up about something. I thought he was here to argue with me at first and was about to call the cops to have him forcibly removed from my property, but to my surprise, he actually started crying once again. But this time it was a lot more real rather than for effect, like it was the last time. I dropped everything that I had been doing to try and console him because I was still just human at the end of the day. And I can't be the person who watches somebody cry and says nothing about it. Even if it had been Fiona in his place, I would have done the same thing. After a while, he calmed down enough and told me that he had taken a day off from work and was spending it at home because he was depressed about the divorce, and then Fiona had come into his room to comfort him. But instead, she started trying to flirt with him and stuff, something she had never done before. He tried to tell her to back off and that he wasn't in the mood for jokes, but then she tried to cuddle with him, and that's where he drew the line. He realized that I had been right about her, and even though he had never thought of her as anything more than a friend or maybe a sister, she had always been trying to get with him. So they ended up getting into a huge fight, and Fiona accused him of leading her on for years, only to get married to me, and called him a cheater before she packed her things and moved back in with her parents. And now he was here to apologize to me and tell me that I had been right about everything. He told me that he was sorry that he had taken me for granted and said that he didn't deserve somebody like me anyway, and this divorce would probably help him get his head back on straight. We talked a little after that and cleared the air. I realized that he wasn't lying when he said that he only loved me and he did think of Fiona as a sister. It wasn't enough to make me stay, but at least it made me feel a lot less terrible about my life decisions. We are still getting divorced, but we are going to try and end things on good terms, and I hope that it works out well for us.